Well, hello everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. I survived yesterday. Boy, was it rough. It was crazy, actually. I had a long day. If you are a regular on my Facebook page or on Patreon or on the weather app, you know all too well that it was kind of crazy up here yesterday with the snow that fell. And of course, the resulting horror that was the evening commute last night in the New York City, Hudson Valley, Connecticut, Long Island, New Jersey, you name it. It was horrible. You heard stories from people that it took them. I had one of my coworkers. It took 7 hours for him to get home, and he lives 20 miles from where we work. So what normally is less than a half an hour drive, 7 hours. You had people that said it took them 4 or 5 hours to go literally a handful of miles. I'm not 100% sure how it all. Well, let's put it this way. Yesterday, you had everything happen all at the same time that really kind of played up to this. And it was really no huge surprise a couple of days ago that we were going to have a horror of a rush hour, if only because of the fact that it was the first snow of the winter. And I would contend that even if it were, if it wound up being as little as a coating to an inch or two, it would have probably caused a similar outcome. You had hundreds and hundreds of accidents. I was actually quite astounded by the fact that on my drive home last night, I left at about 10:15. I got home at 12:30. Normally my drive is about an hour, so it took me about 2.5 hours, which compared to everybody else is not that bad. But I leave at a time of night where I never have any traffic. It's always a straight sail for me. So just to find traffic to deal with was difficult enough. And I drove on I-95 in southeastern New York to get to the bridges so I can get to Long Island. It was like driving on gravel. It was amazing to me that a road as busy as I-95 was as messy as it was, particularly because the snow had stopped about 2 hours earlier. You should have had some melting just from the normal traffic going by, but that was a heavy, heavy, wet snow that fell at rates of about 2 inches an hour in some places at the height of the rush hour on a Thursday night. It was just crazy. So. The other thing is that I'm not convinced that the municipalities prepared. And my understanding is that when winter weather advisories go up, which they did on Wednesday night for the Hudson Valley and for northern New Jersey for just about all of the counties north of Route 78, that they have to go out and salt, pre-salt and brine. And one of the things that at least I noticed, usually in all the time that I've been up in Westchester County in these last 4 years working, that whenever we've had something like the situation like this, when I leave work and they're prepping, the roads here are already brined up. They're usually done fairly quickly, but this time around they did not. That I saw, they didn't do it. And usually you could see the brine on the road, just the kind of a white streaky line that remains. So I figured, all right, well, maybe they're going to do it Wednesday morning. Well, when I drove in Wednesday early, long before the snow started, I saw no evidence that the roads were brined. I didn't feel any salt bouncing off my vehicle. So, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much prep was actually done. The bottom line is that there are times, and I keep emphasizing the fact that with respect to how you look at weather should involve fluidity. You have to accept a certain amount of fluidness. You're never going to get a forecast 3 or 4 days ahead of time that's going to tell you exactly how much snow is going to fall. And the initial forecasts were for a coating to a couple of inches on the coast, and just inland 2 to 4, and further inland 4 to 6. Clearly, those were low in hindsight, and that they should have been higher. And they were raised as it became pretty evident on Thursday morning that the cold air to the north was holding on. That big high. Anytime you have a high up in New England, and you're trying to figure out, is that high going to get out of the way or is it not going to get out of the way? It's a very, very tough call. Sometimes they run out fast, and then the warm air comes flying up. You get a little bit of snow and sleet in the start. It changes over to rain. And other times, it just hangs on. And as we showed yesterday in a bit of post-analysis, that high just did not get out of the way. So the first storm is always the tough one to forecast. It was 6 months. The last accumulating snow, I was reminded, was on April 2nd of last year. And of course, that came off the 4 nor'easters in March. So everybody was kind of conditioned to expecting big snows at that point. But now here we are. We went through spring. We went through summer. We went through the first part of autumn. And here we are in the middle of November getting snow in a month that, well, doesn't usually see snow, at least down here. It's maybe you get accumulating snows here in the month of November every 8 or 9 years. And, well, last time was in 2012 on November the 7th. That was post-Hurricane Sandy. And that was at a time where everybody was kind of so shell-shocked that with all the things that happened during that stretch, the only thing that didn't happen was the swarm of locusts. And I think we were all kind of waiting for that. But now at least we're going into a bit of a quiet time, and the pattern going ahead into Thanksgiving week, and that's a good thing. Big travel week next week. A lot of folks going around the country or coming home. We don't see any big storms. The only action for at least through Thursday looks like we could see some action out in the west, and particularly in the Pacific Northwest and maybe into the northern Rockies. But that's about it. The east, I think, is going to be quiet next week, taking a bit of a pause. The longer range pattern is very dynamic in my view. There's nothing specific yet, but there are some signals pointing to certain time frames that I think we're gonna point out, and we're gonna start paying closer attention to. We'll get to that. Just before I do that, let me at least tell those of you who are maybe new to the board, welcome to my YouTube channel, and hopefully you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is absolutely free. I also want to tell you what is absolutely free. If you are on if you have an Android mobile device and you are in the New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, Southern Connecticut, Hudson Valley area, you can download my weather app. It is absolutely free. I just put the link up on the chat board for you, and you can download it to your Android device. We submitted the iPhone version and to Apple, and hopefully we will get their final approval in the coming days. And it's the minute it comes out, I will post about it on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Chaffee, and also we'll distribute the link right here on the YouTube live stream that we'll have that night. So just stay tuned for that. And Ashante Stevens' Facebook, yes, Meteorologist Joe Chaffee is my Facebook page. Bertha Gunter is on. Nice to see you here. John Sachs, only 3.5 hours to drive 22 miles from Island to Bayonne, and you were lucky. That is quite true. And Seth Dominus, you are correct. 6 inches was a new early season record for New York City Central Park. This is the earliest we have ever seen a 6-inch snowfall, since records at Central Park have been kept since 1869. So that is 149 years. That's quite an accomplishment. Chris Alley, good to see you here. 4 inches, Savage Players. That's what you measured in your neck of the woods. And Garo Vetsis, 3 hours after work to drive 15 minutes to pick up your son from daycare beyond the nightmare. That's just, I mean, that really is incredible. I guess yesterday was one of those odd, maybe it was just one of those days where everybody went to work and nobody stayed home. And I actually heard some people actually say that they didn't know it was going to snow. And that really got me because with everything that's going on with respect to social media and how everything is put out in front of you, you must have been kind of hiding in a hole during the last couple of days because it was going to snow. It was just a question of trying to figure out when the changeover was going to occur. And, you know, we had a loaded system, by the way, that came up from the south with a lot of moisture. If you remember from a couple of nights ago, how impressive that radar presentation was over the southeast U.S. and on up into the Tennessee Valley, and those dew points in Florida in the 70s that pushed their way up into the Carolinas with the severe weather with some heavy thunderstorms that broke out there right along the coast as the coastal low developed. This was really just ripe. You've got that intense moisture, some places getting an inch of liquid in 6 hours' time, and that really kind of put it all down as far as the snow amounts are concerned. And with regards to those snow amounts, so I've got some maps that we can take a look at what did fall from this, and starting with my neck of the woods, thanks to the National Weather Service in New York for this map. And here it is now full screen, so I'm going to disappear for a little while, and we'll keep the maps up front and center. But the snow amounts this is substantial, and actually, if you think about it, do not be shocked that for some areas now the bar is really set high, that this could wind up being the biggest snowfall of the season if we don't get any big major storms this year. But this is a pretty substantial snowfall here in any winter, let alone having it in the middle of the month of November. The coastal areas, probably the biggest surprise, I guess you might say, were the coastal areas, if only because you would expect with ocean water temperatures still in the middle 50s that you would change over fairly quickly. But again, that big high and that wind that was more northeast rather than east-northeast, and it really wasn't that wind actually was fairly light into the afternoon. There wasn't a lot of warm air that came in off the water until the wind picked up late in the day. And even then, it wasn't until after 7 o'clock at night that you saw the rain change over to the snow change over to rain on Long Island. Long Island snow amounts, even over eastern Long Island, picking up 2 to 3 inches. And one of the biggest forecast busts almost all the time from forecasters occurs over eastern Long Island, because they make the big mistake of thinking that this is extending out in the middle of the ocean and it's like the Jersey Shore, but it isn't. And northeast wind off the Jersey Shore, especially in central and south Jersey, winds up coming pretty much off the water all the way across, where here there's some land trajectory that comes down from New England, and that keeps this area in eastern Long Island, usually keeps it colder than you might think. And then, of course, you see how the amounts increase as you go central and west, up to 5.5 inches. We had some Central Park with New York City 6.4. A little less, of course, along the south shore of Queens and Brooklyn and Staten Island. Coastal New Jersey, 2 to 3 inches. Even east of the Parkway, some places in Monmouth County picked up some accumulating snow there of a couple of inches. And, of course, then the amounts start to go up. You get north of Route 78 in New Jersey, and you start to see the 6 to 8 inch amounts. 10 up in the northwest corner of New Jersey. And then the Hudson Valley numbers were really impressive, with a foot at Poughkeepsie, Gardnertown at 13 inches. Mount Hope, which, by the way, has elevation to it. I think it's 1,500 feet up, 18.3 inches. But they always go off the wall up there because of the elevation. Monroe, 11 inches. Rhinebeck, 8.5. Numbers were strong in Connecticut as well, with just north of Route 15. You got mostly 7 to 10 inches of snow throughout the state. And in the Northeast, you can look at the Northeast map here, and there was the concentration of heaviest snow from just west of Boston on westward through Massachusetts, southeastern New York. Didn't quite make it to Albany. The amounts really scaled off. If anybody got a burn out of this, it was just north of I-90. Just really didn't get very much. from this, and you see how the amounts increased once you went west of Albany toward north central New York. A little bit of lake action involved in there eventually, and also up through northern Pennsylvania, northern and central Pennsylvania, down into southeastern Pennsylvania. They had accumulating snows in Baltimore and Washington, down into the mountains of northwestern Virginia and in northeastern West Virginia. So this was, again, for this time of year, this is one that they'll look back on to figure out how and why everything happened. Now, what's going on now on the surface map? Well, yesterday's storm has intensified. It's sitting right along the south coast of Nova Scotia. They're getting heavy rains and some gusty winds there. Some precip being thrown back or at least earlier was being thrown back to the Maine coast, but that low is going to continue to move toward the northeast. The Atlantic coast of Canada has not gotten the kind of snow that has occurred further inland and in throughout the rest of southeastern Canada. And by the way, I think it's fair to say that the buildup of early snow cover in Canada in September and October has played a key role in this early outbreak of cold and snow in the Northeast during this month of November. I really believe that watching for the early buildup of snow cover in North America, in Canada, is a very important factor in early onsets of the winter season in the Northeast. We saw it last year, and we saw it again this year. Last year, the snow cover growth from September to November was at a decadal high, and this year it even surpassed last year. So very, very impressive indeed. And for this time of year, these are cold temperatures across the Northeast, 30s and low 40s, which is what we have this evening. Head down south, we're looking at 50s. By the way, this was as of 4 p.m. Today. I think that is the latest map, and I'm just updating. Yep, it is. We don't have the 7 o'clock map yet. You get into the 50s and 60s, and some of that cooler air did manage to find its way down into northern Florida, but southern Florida even getting a break. Temperatures today mostly late this afternoon in the mid 70s, and going out to the west, got a bit of a warm front here that's setting up over from a low in Colorado, and another low that is sitting up in Nebraska. So north of that, in this zone up in the northern plains, you've got some very cold air, teens and 20s, and some snow that is falling tonight up in the northern plains. In fact, we have some winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings up for parts of the northern plains down into southern Minnesota. You can see the radar there is pretty active, going back up into parts of Wyoming and Montana. So this is the one area that overnight is going to get some snow. The Pacific Northwest is quiet. California continues to remain quiet as they wait for some break in the pattern to get some rain. The Southeast, very quiet. The Northeast, you're getting a little bit of lake effect action off Lake Ontario, and also some snow showers, some residual snow showers over in western Maine. The snow from the storm system in eastern Maine is done with. So where are we going? Well, in the long range, I just want to bring up the teleconnections, because the teleconnections are really signaling a very interesting pattern going forward. The models in the long range continue to remain very consistent. We are now going into a negative North Atlantic oscillation, or NAO. So pressures across the North Atlantic and on up toward the Northeast Atlantic, toward Western Europe, are rising, and that is going to displace the jet stream in the Atlantic further to the south. You're going to have higher pressures to the north and lower pressures to the south, as opposed to the opposite. And it gets strongly negative from Thanksgiving up toward the end of the month, and then you start to rise toward the neutral line as you move into December 1st. I would look for something perhaps around that time frame when the NAO is rising from that deeply negative number fairly rapidly, assuming it keeps going and gets to the zero line. somewhere in this area, I think, is has potential for something. Again, right around the 30th of November or the 1st. And actually, I think there's a shot even next weekend that we could see something off the East Coast, although I don't think it's going to be cold enough for snow this time around. It may be something. It may be more. It may be rain more than anything else. But we'll get to that in a second. The other thing that's happening, if you look at the Pacific North America Index, is the PNA, which is its calculation tells you strongly positive number means that you have a ridge of high pressure aloft in the western part of the United States being offset by a trough in the eastern part of the United States when it's strongly positive. So you do have it slightly positive going into Thanksgiving. Then it kind of drops a little bit into slightly negative territory. So that's probably means that ridge is getting crashed. Either the ridge is getting crashed somewhere, or the trough in the east is lifting out toward the end of next week. So one or both of those things could be happening and since the number goes only slightly negative, it's in a minor way. But notice that as we move toward the end of the month, that PNA jumps back up to a strongly positive number. So it's telling you that the ridge west trough east idea becomes strongly established again. So if you got a big PNA number and it starts to get off the wall, you get a strong ridge in the west and a deep trough in the east. This is where you could have some storm development somewhere. And I say somewhere because it doesn't guarantee that it's going to be in a spot that would be favorable for you to get snow or not get snow. That's another variable entirely. The last index is the East Pacific Oscillation, which is strongly negative right now. The EPO, I've said many times, the EPO is one of the ones I really pay the most attention to when it's in negative territory, because that's usually a cold scenario for the eastern part of the United States, regardless of whether you've got snow or storms or not. And it's strongly negative now, which is reflecting the fact that we're sitting here with temperatures running a good 10 or more degrees below average on a daily basis. And it rises to neutral at the same time that the PNA goes negative, the EPO goes positive. So that's at the end of next week. And then you see the dropping negative again as we move through the last days. So again, I think the focus of attention for something important in the East, possibly next weekend, but perhaps we may have to wait till at the very last day of the month or going into the first days of December. And after that, we'll see if we get another situation to follow it. But so we're going to keep our eyes on this to see how it evolves, and we obviously are going to have plenty of time to watch it because of the fact that the weather is going to be relatively quiet. So let's look at the GFS for this evening. Try to make this map a little bit bigger for you. Okay, that should do it. And we, of course, you can see in the upper right the departing storm near Nova Scotia. The next big high with cold air that's coming down into the plains and the snow that's there with it for tonight, which basically dries up. We get that weak disturbance. By the time it reaches here, it's still pretty weak. Sunday night into Monday morning, maybe a rain or snow shower, depending on whether you're far inland or along the coast. And it kind of hangs there for a bit into Tuesday until a secondary front comes through. And that's when we'll get this shot of cold air for Tuesday into Wednesday. Notice the weather across the country going into Tuesday, very, very quiet. Just about not much is happening anywhere from coast to coast, other than maybe some light precip along the Texas Gulf Coast, and you start to see some rain off the Pacific Northwest. And next Wednesday, the big travel day, you wind up getting the first front coming into the west, and that brings rain into central and northern California, even maybe some showers in southern California, but heavier rain and some snow up in the northwest. And they've been quiet for a while because of the pattern we've been in. The original west has been keeping storms away. So this is where it opens up a bit late next week on Thanksgiving Day. You start to get a stronger system coming into the northwest on Thanksgiving Day. You've got a system that is south of the Louisiana coast here on Thursday, and nice weather throughout much of the east for Thanksgiving Day, which is good, and will be moderating from the cold shot that comes in Tuesday night and Wednesday. It'll be cold. It won't be crazy cold, but it'll be cold for Tuesday, later Tuesday, and on Wednesday into Wednesday night. So after that goes out, some of that energy in that southern stream tries to form a storm system here. A coastal front of some kind here. Friday night from the Carolinas down to Florida. And the models have come back to trying to get a low going there for next Sunday. And you can see it's got a fairly wrapped up surface low east of the Delmarva Peninsula. But again, there's no cold air here, so it would be rain. This is coinciding with the strongly negative NAO. So you're going to have these storm tracks that are going to want to go further south. You've got a negative PNA, so not much of a ridge in the west. So that says that if the ridge in the west is not that strong, this might have a bit of a tough fight, impacting areas other than the immediate coast with clouds and some rain. And the bulk of it seems offshore, although it does clip Cape Cod with some heavy rains. It's got a pretty wrapped up low at this point when we get into next Sunday. So we'll see. Maybe the ridge in the west will be a little stronger. Perhaps the trough that's coming in won't be as deep. That's something we'll look for late next weekend. Weak system over in the Great Lakes actually producing more rain showers than anything else. So this is also the point where that EPO goes slightly positive. So the temperatures moderate a bit. They don't get super warm. They just moderate. And then as that low pulls away and the EPO starts to go negative, now you start to get that ridge popping back up in the west. We do see that the GFS does try to bring a low straight across Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and then drops it southeast off the coast. That seems to be an unrealistic type of track. They usually don't track that way. But look at the surface here. You've got high pressure now, and we're looking at a week. We're looking down the road here at day 10 or 11. It probably won't look like this, okay? But the signature, I think, is what's important. If you see that high that's sitting there, that 1032 high that's north of North Dakota, it's literally enveloped all the way around. This is what the blocking is doing. This is what the negative NAO is doing. It's creating this big high across southern Canada, and with the jet stream suppressed further to the south, the surface lows are moving underneath it. So you see how the models, at least in this run of the long range, they do signal a storm system toward the end of the month, and then another one that follows that as we go into the month of December. I think it's worth paying attention to down the road. Nothing, of course, remotely imminent, obviously, but it's the flavor of the pattern that I think is the big takeaway here. And we'll look at the upper air, and this will really kind of tell the whole story here. So here you see how next week on Thanksgiving the flow is very zonal, very west to east across the U.S. So that is telling you that after Wednesday, as I back it up, there's the system that just went by. You've got this next trough in the east for early next week that brings the shot of cold air down for Tuesday and Wednesday. And then after that lifts out, now you have this period where things moderate because the upper flow becomes westerly. The ridge in the west gets crashed somewhat. And then through next weekend, you start to get energy dropping down to the southwest. But notice that pressures across across northwest Canada, the heights there in the upper air start to rise, and that begins to reestablish that ridge and that Pacific North America index. Also notice, by the way, the trough that is setting up near 160 west. That's important. A deep trough at 160 west. That allows the ridge to build up along the west coast, and now you've got in a longer period, you've got a connection from Canada. The flow is actually kind of split here. You've got this connection from Canada with winds coming down from the Arctic regions across northwest Canada and then southeast from there into the Great Lakes and northeast. You've got energy in the west that's coming in Dropping down into the southwest, you see that there, this trough that's down from Colorado down into New Mexico and into Mexico and West Texas. That Pacific energy is being shot out by this cutoff low that's sitting well north of Hawaii. And then the question becomes, as you look at this upper air, are you going to get some kind of phase or not? How's this all going to play out? Very, very interesting setup here. And if you look up near the Arctic region, you've got higher than normal pressures over Alaska, you've got higher than normal pressures over Greenland, and out towards Scandinavia. So the Arctic region is basically going to higher pressures and displacing the whole jet stream pattern way to the south. This is a very dynamic look in the upper air. Does it look this way? I mean, is it literally going to look this way 16 days from now? No, it's not. This is going to change quite a bit. But again, the overall pattern is what you want to look at this point, and it is saying that we are perhaps going to be getting into a dynamic period. The fact that the NAO is crashing today and not 10 days from now, I think is also quite relevant and very important, because we know that a lot of times when the GFS tries to show blocking, that it doesn't always, more often than not, it doesn't happen. But the fact that the NAO is crashing negative now is a very good sign with regards to it being correct on the idea. The NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation, for whatever reason, the GFS model in its long range has a tough time with it. Makes the models very unstable, and they start to change pretty rapidly and radically from run to run. So it's nice that we'll have a quiet period ahead to kind of focus on the long range more and not have to get too worked up with the short range machinations, just like yesterday. You know, a day like yesterday just really keeps me crazy on my toes, and I'm really, really tired. So it takes a lot out of me, because I'm doing TV at the same time. I'm trying to get you guys, covered at some point during the day, and I seem to have found, kind of the right mix. So I'm going to come back to the chat board at this point. Just right before I do that, really quick, you got the link to my free app. For those of you who really want to take it to the next level, here is the link to my Patreon platform. A number of you have joined it and have expressed that you really, really like it. It's a subscription platform. It's just $2 a month. It's the cost of a cup of coffee, and you get a lot of weather stuff on there. Plus, the stuff that's on there doesn't show up anywhere else. Doesn't necessarily show up on my. There's extra stuff that doesn't show up on my Facebook page. Doesn't show up on my website. It's just for the Patreon folks, and you get most days a video in the morning. I'm sorry, a live stream in the morning. We've been doing them at about 9:30 or 10 o'clock. As the new NAM run comes in, and when it's relevant, we'll bring it up and live stream the new NAM. You get that just for Patreon members, and the Patreon members seem to enjoy that, because you've got my full attention. Not that you don't have my attention here, but it's just a small group of people, and you can ask the questions, and I pretty much answer everyone's and don't miss anyone. So think about that. If you want more weather and really get involved with a good group of people, you can join my Patreon platform. PlayStation Boss, I'd imagine a zonal flow in the jet stream as well. The zonal flow transition is important because, remember, the upper, it can't stay crazy forever. The pattern, however dynamic it is, and we've been in a very dynamic pattern, I believe, since mid-October, so for the last month or so, has to take a break. It's just as if the pattern has kind of spent itself out, and the atmosphere takes a bit of a break, reloads, and then a lot of times it'll revert to the original pattern, and maybe with a little bit of a twist to it. There might be something slightly different. but it does rhyme to some degree. And I think that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing the NAO, which up until now really hasn't been a factor, get involved. I do believe, by the way, with respect to yesterday, that one of the reasons that high held on, a big reason that high held on, was the fact that that North Atlantic oscillation was crashing down from positive to neutral. In other words, everything in the atmosphere was basically slowing down as that North Atlantic oscillation was going from positive to negative. And yes, Anthony Orr, that combination of the strong PNA and the negative NAO is going to be very, very interesting indeed. One man's opinion, and I appreciate you hitting super chat tonight. Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate it. You'll get myself. I got myself a espresso tonight. Gonna be to give me a little bit of a boost. Ashante Stevens was surprised that traffic was backed up yesterday so bad that I waited on the bus for 35 minutes and then walked 2.3 miles and no bus at all. Well, you know what? You probably got, wherever you were going, as miserable as it might have been walking in that snow, you probably got there faster by walking than if you had waited and gotten the bus. Delvin, haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you here, buddy. 2.7 inches at Logan Airport, and I'm guessing that you probably had higher amounts as you went west and further inland up in the Boston area. Heavy sleet, Ethan Kerr says, yesterday afternoon had changed to all rain in coastal Ocean County in New Jersey. Big story was damaging winds. Yes, last night the winds, when that surface low moved its way to off the New Jersey coast, the gradient, I noticed the gradient on the surface map plot this morning was extremely tight. And you had gusts to 60 miles an hour for a number of hours. I also had some strong wind gusts of 50 plus out my way in central Long Island. Quite the storm that moved. Phoenix, hi. Yes, I'm a television forecast. I'm a meteorologist on TV, and in the New York area. I'm on FiOS 1 News, which is a cable news outlet that is on the air in Long Island, New Jersey, and the Hudson Valley. And I also occasionally work at WPIX TV in New York City. And you're from the United Kingdom. Welcome aboard. We do have a group that does watch from the UK, particularly as weather in the UK gets important. And by the way, in fact, just for you, I haven't looked, but I have seen some tweets from Dr. Judah Cohen, who's we've had on our show before, who watches the polar vortex in the stratosphere and snow cover growth. He has been talking about the weather in Europe, and with this blocking pattern, that it could mean some cold and snow coming for you. So we can take a look at what's happening across the pond, as we say, on the GFS. I'm giving it just a kind of a basic view here without really doing any kind of analysis. We do see, at least on the GFS, next week on Tuesday, a low that crosses from the Mediterranean to the northern Adriatic. It's rather strong, and it does produce rain and snow going north and west of there into the Alps. You know, back about 2 weeks ago, there was something similar but very intense that moved like this from out of the Mediterranean and created huge flooding in Venice. You might have seen the videos running around, including the one of the restaurant that was flooded in water and people sitting around wearing boots and eating pizza, because after all, you know, as Italians, we got to have our dinner and our pasta. And it was very funny to see, actually. Nothing stops us. That low winds up going into Austria-Hungary, and you've got this east-west band of snow across Poland and Germany, back through the Netherlands and northern France, rain showers in England, but you've got this easterly flow here that's setting up. Not a whole lot of cold air in Siberia, but there is some. It doesn't quite... it's not quite the magnitude of what you might normally see with these Siberian these highs. In fact, that high is more up near Scandinavia than actually in Siberia. but it does bring for cool easterly winds. Not a whole lot of snow showing up for England on this particular run, but perhaps as we get into December, you might wind up with a pattern adjustment as this whole blocky pattern sets up across the Atlantic, and the Arctic regions are going to be under higher than normal pressures, which would, depending on the position of the blocks, would favor colder weather for Europe. So tell your friends to watch, and let me know when you're on board, because I will definitely pull the maps up for your neck of the woods. You know what? While we're at it, and I got a couple of minutes before we got to go, why don't we just take a look at southeastern Canada, because I do know, we do have some folks that watch from Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, so we don't want to leave them out. And by the way, if there's something pressing that you want addressed, please put it on the chat board, because I don't always remember to do it, okay? With everything that's going on, I don't always remember to pull up the Canada map, to pull up the map from Europe. And if you're on board watching from someplace other than the United States, you need only tell me. So here's our low tonight over Nova Scotia that actually brings a fair amount of snow to Newfoundland overnight into Saturday morning. So we're probably seeing snow developing now in the next few hours across Newfoundland and moving, continuing to Saturday, except along the immediate southeast coast. That low moves just inland there and deepens as it moves out to the northeast. And going into next week, looks like maybe a little bit of snow on Tuesday. Nova Scotia getting a little bit of it there, depending on how much cold air gets in. And then that coastal low develops in the middle of next week that goes way out, at least according to the model. Now, of course, we know that this is going to wind up changing. I'll be curious to see in the longer range how it handles that gale center for next weekend. So it does bring some rain to Nova Scotia next weekend, early the following week, and then pulls it away to the east. So I'm sure this blocking pattern is going to have some impact on the weather for you folks in southeastern Canada. So let me come back to the chat board real quick. As I said, I got a couple of minutes left, and then it's time for me to go. A lot of our storms in the Northeast do wind up in the UK. Greenfire 919. Danny Davis wants me to look at Australia. Okay. Last thing I can do before my clock runs out. Let me see. I know he's got tropicaltidbits.com, by the way, for those of you watching from Europe, the UK, and from down under. Tropicaltidbits.com is the site that I use for maps. Now it is spring for you. Now I really, again, I don't know how things work down here, okay, from the standpoint of the local climate. But at least through this weekend, you can see where the showers are, and going into next week, into parts of southeastern Australia, actually a little bit of snow shows up there, way down in the southeast. So there must be some mountainous terrain, I'm guessing. And got a couple of lows that are just sort of sitting there. But much of Australia looks to be on the dry side through that 10-day period. It doesn't look like any big storms impacting Australia. Are you actually in Australia that you're asking this? I'm curious, because that would be really, really cool to have someone from Australia on my live stream. You are from Australia. That is excellent. Oh, thank you very much for joining the chat board tonight. Really, it's wonderful. I get such a kick out of the fact that I'm getting people from all over the world. And one of these days, Australia's on my list of places to go. Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, England. For some reason, I really feel the need that I have to come to England and Ireland. Okay, I have felt that for most of my life. I don't know why, but I got to get there. So England, Ireland, Nova Scotia first, Newfoundland, then England, and then Ireland, and then Australia. Joe Gaffney, team are so explicit in the detail on the short and long-term Thank you very much, Joe. I've known you for many years. I really appreciate you going back to my old News 12 days back in the late 1980s. So it's good to see you on board here on the YouTube live stream. Thanks for being here. Yes, I will do it before Brexit. I get it. John Corner in Northern Ireland, welcome, and thanks for being here. Just again, if you're on the live stream and you need me to address some weather issues in the UK, in Ireland, just let me know. Danny in Australia or from wherever you're watching. And even you folks in the U.S. need to the same thing. Scott Reese, Weather Channel reversed their winter forecast completely. Thank you so much. And we'll see how long that lasts. You know what? I could be really cynical here and say that that's probably the worst thing that could happen if you're a winter weather lover. I as a rule, I do not watch what other. I don't watch the Weather Channel. I don't watch any of the local TV people here while I'm working, because I don't want to be biased. And any forecaster that any of you young forecasters that might be watching, that is a good rule to follow. Do not watch what other people are doing. If you're going to watch, you do it after you've made your forecast, not during and not before. You don't want to be biased by what they're doing. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people have the correct idea only to get biased by someone else, and then finding out that their original idea was the one to go with. Make your own mistakes. That's the only way you learn from in weather, and just about anything in life. But it's very important in weather that you learn from your own mistakes so that you know what to look for the next time around. Don't make someone else's mistake, because then you won't have any way of knowing how the mistake was made and what you need to do to correct it. All right, folks, I got to call it a night at this point. So just once again, really fast, if you want an expanded weather experience, $2 a month minimum is all it costs to join my Patreon platform. And I've got the link up there on the chat. And also, if you have an Android device and this is free, go to Google Play and you can search my name, Joe Cioffi, Cioffi, or meteorologist Joe Cioffi, and here's the link to that, to the device, to the app, my new free app. So get the app, take a look, and if you want to take it to the next level, then sign up to Patreon. You can link to Patreon straight off the app, or if you've already got the app, you can go to Patreon. And if you have an iPhone, don't worry. The iPhone version hopefully will be coming out soon enough. All right, folks, have a great night. Have a great weekend. I probably will take tomorrow off. I'm going to take a bit of a break tomorrow after the week that we've had. And being that the weather's pretty quiet, it's probably a good day to do it. And then we'll come back Sunday evening with our next live stream, okay? And I know sometimes I change my mind, but this time I think I'm not going to change my mind. Patreon folks, you'll probably get a short live stream tomorrow, and more than likely you'll get it in the morning, okay? I know Saturday everybody's running around doing stuff, but if it winds up changing it, you just look for my post tomorrow when I always post the time that I'm going to do the live stream on Patreon. So just look for that post and the link, the YouTube link that goes with it, because it's private only to Patreon members. Have a great evening, everybody, and a great weekend, and we'll see you at some point over